welcome to Can It Still Game. Now we're going to look at the final piece of the Core i3-2100 review and see if it could still play games in 2019. And before we start, we're going to have a quick look at our specs for this gaming period. We have, of course, the i3-2100 Sandy Bridge. For our graphics card, we have the RX 570 4GB Sapphire Nitro Plus, 8GB of DDR3 RAM, 240 SSD, Apacer SSD, and the rest are pretty standard stuff. For the software, we're using Windows 10 Pro 64-bit, and we're also using the latest driver from AMD for our graphics, so that's Adrenalin 19.7.1. And for this review, we're going to run the i3-2100 with 4 different games. We'll start off with 2 Battle Royale games, PUBG and Rings of Elysium. And then we're going to follow it up with older games like Dota 2 and CSGO. And we'll see if this processor still holds up to these games today. And before we start reviews, we're going to have a brief look on overlay with Msi Afterburner. I know some of us in the channel are still new to gaming. I'm just going to have a quick explanation on the numbers that you find on the screen. So when you run Msi Afterburner, you will have an option to run this overlay, which will give you up-to-date information about certain sensors in your computer. And in this setting, I've run the graphics card. So that's RX 570 labeled here. The next number, that would be the percentage, which the graphics card, the usage of the graphics card, and then the last one will be the core clock of the graphics card. For the next 4 rows, that will be the CPU. So for the i3-2100, technically it has 2 cores, but it has 4 threads. So that's why we're seeing like 4 CPUs over there. So technically it's only like 2 CPUs but 4 threads, so each CPU has a couple of threads that it could use. So and on the right side of that one, that's the usage, the computer usage for each thread or core. And then we next go with the RAM. So the RAM is pretty much your standard memory. It's and in this case we have 8,000 megabytes of RAM. So depending on the game, it may require some RAM or a lot of RAM, or it may require just a little bit of RAM. On the last one, that's the frames per second. So that's how much we're pretty self-explanatory. Frames per second is like the measure for how many frames you get with your video card. On the right side of that one is the frame time. So the higher the frame time, the more stutter that you will get. Ideally with frame times, you would want as low as possible. Yep. And on the lower end, that's basically just the graphs of our frame time. We're going to start off with PUBG. With our settings, I've set it off as very low for everything. However, we did set the anti-aliasing and effects on high. This is so that we will see flashes of any one that's firing at us. Basically, it's just a competitive setting. Right from the get-go, we do see that our CPU is really the bottleneck here. You got almost 100% on all threads. Not so much with our graphics. The graphics is holding fine. 8493, that's pretty much fine. We could actually see that the CPU is the bottleneck here. So you can see that the frames do drop 40, 55, So far so good. Let's see. Yep, 46, 65. Pretty okay. We do get some status here and there with PUBG. I think this is, even with higher clock systems, higher speed system, you do get those status here when you start the game. It's something to do with the servers, and they're not yet that optimized. However, with the game, you still get like 35 milliseconds. You see the frame rates have dropped really low here. 20, 30, that's pretty low for my standards. You can still play, but it's just that low. So it does have that higher frame rate if you look on the ground. Indoors is not so bad indoors. You still get around 40, 50, and occasional, yeah, you see that one there, occasional frame dips. Yep, not so bad indoors. Still, if you see at our RAM is really ramping up. It's about 6 gigabyte of RAM. CPU is tapping out. So yeah, running. Disable the inventory characterization, character render, because even with higher spec systems creates lag. I don't know why. Still not that optimized. Okay, now we're running here, and yep, frames are not that bad. You've got the occasional dips, but so far it's still playable. We got 44, 40 FPS, 45, 46, not too bad. At very low. So yep, it's playable, but yep. You see on a graphics card in there, there's not much graphics usage. It's sometimes goes like single digits usage, so we can clearly see that it's actually the CPU that's the bottleneck here. Basically, when I say bottleneck, it means that the CPU is holding the graphics card, holding up the graphics card, so the graphics card processes things really quickly, but unfortunately the CPU can't keep up. So that's why, yeah, sometimes the graphics card is just idling there at single digits usage while the CPU is really trying its best to, you know, this is a really old i3. It's trying its best to work. Yep, so yeah, that's PUBG there. It's playable, but you would expect your FPS would be around 30 at the worst, and probably about high 50s or 60s at the best. Normally it would center around 40 plus FPS, so I'd say you can play it. But if you're really into that really competitive setting, if you're really a competitive gamer, I'd probably suggest you get another processor, maybe an i5, the next i5. You know, there's a heaps of i5-2400. Let's say maybe because of the 4 cores, it'll probably run better. Whereas with i3, because it only has 2 cores with 4 threads on PUBG, it really is struggling. It will tap out. It's really just, you know, just maxing out the processors. It's not that good. Now, I know some people will probably say, you know, you must have just set everything on very low. So I've got a video here when I've set everything on very low. Everything on very low. Basically, it's no beta. The only thing is that because the anti-aliasing is not there, it just makes things not so as a bit pixelated on some ends. Yeah, but you will probably get about 70, but most of the time you'll probably be still sitting at around, you know, 40, 50. So yeah, you've got a little bit of more FPS there, but you know, with how the anti-aliasing is absent, you barely can see your target far away. So you could play it. It's playable at this setting, but wouldn't recommend it. The reason being, like I said, is because it's not that clear. You probably would have lesser chances of seeing where your enemies are, and in this game PUBG, seeing and hearing where your enemy is really matters in this game. So our next game is Rings of Elysium. It's, let's just say, close to PUBG, but it has a different gameplay. And the only thing with this game is that unfortunately it's fairly unoptimized. Even with my main gaming rig, I still experience like not so good frame rates. So anyway, the settings for this game that we're playing is low, so basically everything on very minimal settings, and then let's see how it. So yeah, right from the get-go, even at the map selection stage, we're already experiencing very low frame rates at 30, 35. Yep, so like I said, we have really low settings here. Standard for the anti-aliasing, graphics are low. We are not using the DX12, we're using just basically ordinary DX11 here. Let's see how the game plays. That's not really good there. The frame times are even really high, but like I said, mind you, this is a very unoptimized game. Yep, so from here, like, I mean, yep, you see about 27 FP, 24 FPS. Wow, that's really low. I mean, it still plays. If you don't know anything about FPS, you probably won't notice it, but like I said, this is a very unoptimized, very poorly optimized game. We do see that our CPU is holding up. CPU is around 80% usage, so that's not bad. I guess it's probably just this game, really. Yeah, so 38 FPS, 30 FPS. Yep, and you got about 40 indoors. 40 indoors. GPU usage. Yeah, so it's not really maxed out. Even our CPU is not maxed out. You can still play this game. You can still play this game. Probably not the best experience, but yeah, you could still run it. And so I don't know why this game still runs within. This game has been released for quite some time already, but even so, it's still poorly optimized. The makers of this game is Tencent, so they are basically the ones who made PUBG Mobile. Well, the good thing about this game is there are like heaps of things, and they sort of like made things from PUBG. If you were playing PUBG and you transition to ROE or Rings of Elysium, they're a bit let's just say the game is more user friendly. It like equips things for you, but the only thing is, as I mentioned, is it's poorly optimized. So even with our i3-2100 here, which is still an old CPU, it still runs. It's not maxed out, but it's just that, I don't know, it's just not getting 60 FPS. It's just not getting at that range. It's just around 30, not bad 30. It's not the stuttery 30, but I guess this is basically how the game is designed. Right, so that's for Rings of Elysium. Let's move on to our next game. Alright, for our next game we have Dota 2. So we're going to start off with these settings here. So I've set it up as the best looking ones.
Yes.
Let's see how the Core i3-2100 holds up.
Prepare for battle.
Okay, so we're starting here. We've got really good frame rates here. 70 at the starting round.
Deploying.
Yeah, a bit slow in this game. I'm still learning. I mean, it's been a while since I played Dota 2. You see that the graphics card does not have much usage at all. The CPU is holding out, so that's fine. We've got about 60, 70 FPS while at the base. So that's not bad, I suppose. Yeah, I'm still figuring out how to what items I was going to use. Like I said, it's been a very long time since I played Dota, and when I was actively playing that game, I was still in the Dota, you know, the original Dota, not the Dota 2. Anyway, let's go back to the game. Yep. So we've got 70 FPS, sometimes 80 FPS. Let's wait until our character here reaches the creeps. Oops, we got a big dip there.
Yes. Aye.
So yeah, ultimately not bad. Not bad at all. So this is with the best looking settings at 1080p. So you got about 40 to 60, sometimes 70 FPS if there's nothing going on. I'd pretty say that this is pretty decent. I mean, it's pretty decent, pretty solid. It's playable. You do have that occasional dead spot. Pretty good overall. Now I know what you're going to think. Why don't you try something that's a bit the lower settings? So we will try that, and we'll try that now. Okay, let's try this at the fastest settings. Cool. So now you have gain probably about 20 FPS, which is good, but you have a very ugly looking game. So we were playing at around 40 or 60, mostly around 50, but now we have around 70 FPS, which is good in terms of numbers, but you can see the characters doesn't really look very good. I probably prefer the best looking option. Would probably be getting about 50 FPS if there's just normal creeps, but if you do get in a clash in this option, you will get some drops at around 30 or about 38, around that number, 30 to 40, around that number. But that's something I could live with. It's basically an RTS game. It's not like it's like all FPS will matter like CSGO, like every FPS matters, but in this game it's more like just clicking and getting your timings right. It may affect some people, but at the end of the day you can still play the game, and I prefer playing this with a very good looking game. Alright, for our last game we have Counterstrike Global Offensive. This is a pretty old game, but still being played around the world, especially in esports. So with the settings, I've just set everything on pretty standard. Just set the shadow quality at very low, because I do remember that if you have like higher shadow quality, you'll experience a bit of lag. And I just want the game to look good as well. So we'll see how this goes. Okay. So we don't have much of a bottleneck here. Our CPU is about 70-80%. Graphics card very minimal, single digit, sometimes 90, so it's not that bad. RAM doesn't take up a lot of RAM. It's only about 4 gigabytes of RAM, 4 gigabytes. So even so, we're still getting about 70 FPS for Counter-Strike Global Offensive. I mean, you could probably set this at a very low settings and you'd probably get those higher FPS. But at this stage, I want to see a very good looking game, so that's why I've just set it up in these settings. Okay, and I'll let you watch the rest of the game and see how it goes. So in summary, the i3-2100 is clearly showing its age. It's a very old CPU and it can still run those older games such as Dota 2 and Counter-Strike Global Offensives without any problems. You won't run into much problems with this processor if you're still playing those old games. However, when you run into more modern games like PUBG and even the unoptimized Rings of Elysium, you will run into a lot of bottlenecks and problems. I mean, with PUBG, we really clearly have CPU bottleneck. The CPU was almost 100% all the time, and well, the graphics card was lagging behind. It's because the graphics card is still waiting for the processor to, well, the i3 processor to process things. So it's just you know, just chilling over there. And Rings of Elysium, so that, like I said, that game's clearly unoptimized, but you're still running at about 30 FPS for that game. Yeah, I probably wouldn't recommend this processor for either of those modern games. Dota and CSGO, definitely. So the i3 is good for really old games. i3-2100 is really good for old games. What I meant look at using this processor as well is just for a home PC. So if you're not doing anything more like you know, Facebook or just basically a PC you want to stream things with, browse things on the internet, watch some YouTube movies. As basically a home theater PC, yes, you could get away with i3-2100. You probably would need to put like a discrete graphics card if you want to, or you could use the onboard chip. Regardless, the i3-2100 is a really old processor. I wouldn't put this in gaming with newer titles. So even if, I don't know if you guys have seen my previous videos on Fortnite using this processor, so you can still see on those videos that the i3-2100 is really struggling in keeping up with the game. So yeah, that's my call, i3-2100. Let me know what you think. You think of this processor. Do you have it? Are you still using it? If you are, yep, put your comments down below. And thank you for watching. Please subscribe.